welcome to the Real Shot Recruiting Podcast. My name is Michael Lloyd. You can find us on YouTube at Real Shot Recruiting and on Twitter at Real Shot Recruit. I'm very excited to bring you this week's episode because we are going to be having a special guest on, a very close personal friend of mine that I've known a very long time. He is a former college basketball player as well as a current basketball coach. As well as a former and current recruiter. He has experience at literally every single level, going from Division One all the way to Division Three, and NAIA and Division Two as well. So literally every division. So I'm very excited to get his wealth of knowledge and his real mentality on things, and he definitely shoots you straight. So I'm very excited to have him on the podcast. I do plan on having him on in future episodes as well, because the information that he has and the wealth of knowledge that he has in his brain can certainly cannot be covered in just one episode. So definitely going to need to have him come on in the future. So let's just jump right into this week's topic, though, because I wanted to go over something that we touched on last week, which if you haven't watched that episode yet, please do. We go over what Real Shot Recruiting is, as well as the mission and my recruiting experience and my pathway to playing NAIA basketball. But I wanted to go over JV programs because I played JV basketball, and yes, like it was certainly a humbling experience because when you're going through the recruiting process, you don't necessarily think or expect that you would ever play on a JV program again. You would think, you're getting recruited to play on the main roster. I want to help contribute and compete to championships, right? Well, actually, a lot of times at the Division III and NAIA levels that have JV programs, which is a lot of them, chances are you'll probably play on the JV program your first year and maybe even your second year, but typically just your first year. There is certainly a lot of washout from that first year. A lot of guys, they either can't hack it with the grades or, they can't handle the independence of playing JV basketball and going to college. So if college sports is truly something that you want to do, and maybe you're not the big shot recruit that has all the Division One or even the Division Two offers, it's a realistic option to get into NAIA and Division Three JV athletics at your first year, playing against the varsity roster, and you're learning the system. And once you have the independence to nourish your body, to get your grades right, as well as work out and train like you've never trained before, because you haven't had the exposure to the focus and the schedule that college athletics is. Because it's even if you're playing on a JV program, you're still under the same schedule for the most part. There's certainly much more independence, but you're still on a very similar schedule to the varsity program, and you still learn the same system and same ideas and culture that varsity program is abiding to. And there really isn't much disconnect because you're still practicing and training with that varsity roster. The real disconnect that I remember from my days playing JV basketball was you don't practice as much structured like a scheduled practice, and when they go to games, away games, you don't travel with them because they're not going to take 30 student athletes to go play a basketball game. That's just not realistic. So I remember when I was getting recruited, they didn't tell me, hey, our plans for you are you're going to play JV your first year and then you're going to play on varsity the next 4 years. They told me what their plans were for me moving forward and how they were going to pair me with whoever was on the varsity team at the time, and that was that. It was great. I was like, sure, I'm in. I knew that they had a JV team, but I didn't think I was going to be playing JV. And when I got there, and I don't have any hard feelings about playing JV, don't get me wrong, but when we started like the actual structured, scheduled aspect of basketball, when basketball season was getting underway, we everybody had essentially an equal shot at making the varsity roster. I would call it a tryout, but the tryout didn't have cuts because if you didn't make the varsity roster, you just played on the JV team. And the JV team definitely consists of mostly freshmen. There's a few sophomores that get mixed up in that too. So unfortunately here we lost a little bit of audio from the original recording, which is why I'm now wearing a hoodie, and it's a different time. But basically what we went over in the original video was just the fact that when I played JV basketball, it gave me the opportunity to play a lot of minutes in essentially like high school all-star games. Considering the fact that everybody who is playing JV basketball was this, a serious hooper, when they were in high school. So, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Matt touches on it in our interview, but I'll just send it right over into the interview in just a second. But yeah, if you play JV basketball or any other sport, you may just get the opportunity to play a whole heck of a lot more than you would have if you were placed on the varsity team originally. So that was basically the nuts and bolts of what I went over in that initial video that ended up getting lost or corrupted. So I'll send it over to Matt's video right now. All right, so with me is a very close personal friend of mine, Matt Hilkens, a man with 9+ years of college coaching, recruiting, and playing experience. Matt, can you hear me? How are you?
I can hear you, Mike. Glad to have you here with me.
All right, well, cool. I appreciate you coming on. I know we've talked a lot about this in the past and have definitely wanted to do this for a little while now, so I'm really glad that we're finally able to do it. So, um, I think it's important that I just dive into kind of your background here real quick because, man, do you have a wealth of knowledge. And of course, you've been a mentor for me for a very long time. So, Matt Hilkens, this guy has coached at Morehead State University, so a Division I basketball program, as well as Hillsdale College, a very, very, very strong Division II program that used to be in the GLIAC. Is that right?
Yep,
All
in
right.
the GMAC now.
Gotcha. And then also now currently at Asbury College, which is the Division III school down in Kentucky, and then also at Siena Heights, where I actually was at for my one and only year of college basketball. So that was pretty cool to have you as a connection down there. Now all that was on the women's side, and I do want to mention that everywhere that Matt has been, he has been like overwhelmingly successful. And I mean, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but for the most part, you were flipping programs from maybe mediocre, middle of the road, to conference title contenders. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been very blessed to experience some very good situations with a lot of very talented young women.
Hmm. So let's just jump right into it. That's kind of the style here because we do like to keep it as concise. I'm sure, as you know, working with student athletes, that attention spans might not be as high as they used to be. So let's just jump right in here. Going over the whole recruiting process, that is sort of the goal here is to give kids as many pathways as possible to potential recruiting options. Let's just focus on like one kid that you could be recruiting in your experience. How do you find a kid, and just walk through maybe if there's any differences from the Division I, Division II, Division III, and NAIA levels?
Yeah, I think where you start, no matter what level you're on, is just understanding as a program what kind of player you want to recruit. So, are you a dribble drive team? Are you a motion team? What are your defensive concepts that you're stressing? Because a lot of that stuff will affect the type of player you want to recruit. What kind of size do you want? Do you care how big your players are, or do you not worry about height and you're just worried about the most talented players you can get? So for us, it just kind of starts with what are our core values as a program, and that kind of dictates what we're looking for in a player. So at Asbury, we're a motion centric team that focuses on shooting a lot of threes. So the first thing we're going to look for is, can a kid shoot or not? Because if you can't shoot, then you're going to have some other talent or quality that can make up for your lack of shooting. So the first thing we're going to do is just see if a player can shoot, check what kind of size they have. Obviously for the women's side, the closer you are to 5'10", 6 foot, the more versatile you're going to be for us, the better that makes it for us being able to change up our defensive concepts and kind of play positionless basketball. So that's the first way that we really look into a recruit.
And so when and you're talking about like you're watching a kid in real life or on video, watching them being able to shoot the basketball. So how much, like, I mean, you're probably really focused on mechanics and, maybe how far out they can space the floor, things like that. Um,
Exactly. For us, it's whether it's the first time I'm seeing you in person, whether I'm seeing a recruiting video of you, whether a coach is telling me about a player that they know. The first thing we're going to delve into is how well can you shoot and what kind of size do you bring to the table.
mhm. And so
Um,
if when you see, like, I mean, how fast are you potentially turning off a recruiting video if you see somebody that maybe they've knocked down some threes in their recruiting video, but their form, their mechanics maybe aren't you know conducive to like long-term success. You know what I mean?
in my experience, mechanics is not something that I get drastically involved in. Um, Everybody's going to shoot the ball a different way, unless there's some crazy mechanical flaw. We're pretty open at that point because changing a player's shot by the time you're 18 years old is pretty tough.
Right.
So for us, it really just comes down to how efficient you can be with that mechanic.
What's the difference maybe between, like a Division Three Asbury to like a Moorhead or a Hillsdale?
Yeah. Um, so when you break down recruiting division to division, the Division 1 and 2 schools that I've worked at, their recruiting is a little more streamlined. When you're working with a set roster that you only have 10 full ride scholarships, you almost go by a depth chart. So in this incoming recruiting class, I have to have a point guard and I have to have a center. So if you're not a point guard or a center, it's going to be really hard to crack our recruiting group. Now, obviously, if a recruit shows up that we just think is a no brainer, all American, we're taking them regardless of position.
Hmm.
But unless you're that otherworldly talent, then we're not even going to look at you. And it's nothing against you. It's just at the Division 1 and 2 level, you have to be extremely picky about who you take because at a lot of schools, you're not going to be allowed to cut that player later on down the road.
Hmm.
So if you take an extra shooting guard that doesn't really fit your recruiting and they don't pan out, you're going to be stuck with that player for 4 years.
Right.
So at the Division 1 and 2 level, we were always very specific on what our needs were, whether we needed a point guard or a wing player or a post player. We really broke it down into three positions. So it was combo guard, wing, or post. So you knew with each class what specific position you had to find. So when I'd go out recruiting AAU tournaments, you might be a talented center that can play at the Division two level, but I'm not recruiting a center in your class, so you just don't fit my needs, and it's just not going to work out for us.
Hmm. And is there like a prototypical size that you guys were looking for that's different between, the four different divisions? I know that there's some overlap between maybe the Division 2 to NAIA and Division 3 level, but how much different is Division 1 size versus, the other levels?
Yeah, I think the thing that is interesting about having coached at every level from junior college all the way to Division 1, it really is more so a size factor than a talent factor on a lot of areas. An all conference guard at the NAI level might be 5'9". And if that same kid was 6 foot, they'd be at Division two. And if that same kid was 6 foot but more athletic, then that's a Division one player.
Hmm.
So the level, a lot of it just comes down to your size and what changes for that.
So would you? I mean, at least for me, I know it was realizing, I'm a 6'4", forward slash guard, emphasis on the forward because the ball handling wasn't always, where it needed to be a 6'4" point guard. Um, would you? I mean, you would definitely suggest that, I'm assuming, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but you really gotta, as a prospective student athlete, you really gotta take it upon yourself to be real with yourself and say, okay, I'm a 5'9" big. at the girls level, I'm a 5'9" big. Maybe NAIA or Division 3 might better suit me because I'll just truthfully get bullied unless I can really like rearrange my game to fit the needs of some higher level play, because size definitely matters when it comes to college sports, any sport.
Yeah, and I think that it's a great point that you make, that a lot of prospective student athletes get caught up in. In your specific situation, you were a 6'4", 165-pound freshman coming in, that the same player with your body going into a Division 1 program is probably already at 190 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference there. And I think the second factor of your point is, I've had experiences where I had been recruiting a student athlete since they were a freshman in high school. And we've been talking to you for 3 years, showing you how much we want you in our program and how much we value you. And then July, going into your senior year, a Division 1 program comes out of nowhere and just offers you last minute, and you take that scholarship just because you want the title of being a Division 1 player. And instead of coming to a very good Division 2 program where you would have had a chance to play meaningful minutes right away as a freshman, you chase that Division 1 title because in the outside world there's this glamour of going Division 1, but you end up sitting the bench for 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of being a 4-year player where maybe you play 18 minutes a game as a freshman, you don't even get a chance to get on the floor till you're a senior.
Right. And like you mentioned, like when you're interested in somebody and you're like, okay, we want you to be here. Like, how do you get to that step of finding those players? Are you, is it because they reached out to you, or how much? Like, obviously, Asbury and Moorhead, all these places you've been are doing, your recruiting work to find players. But how are you guys actually finding those players?
Yeah, I think it's a situation where you can meet in the middle. As a coach, I'm going to do my homework and I'm going to try to evaluate and find talent, whether it's going to AAU games, going to high school games, watching film on players that get sent into us. I'm going to do my due diligence and just make sure I leave no rock unturned. And then at the same time, from a student athlete perspective, you've got to do your research on the schools that you believe you would be interested in. Does their play style fit you? Does their does their values, not only just within the basketball program but the school itself, fit what you're interested in your college experience? Because it comes down to more than just basketball.
Mm-hmm.
It's about getting an education, it's about having a real true college experience. So there's definitely a side where the student athlete needs to do some homework and figure out what kind of program and what kind of college experience they want.
Mm-hmm.
And once you narrow that down, then you can start looking into a school. If you're a type of player that wants to run the floor and be aggressive and shoot shots quickly, you don't want to go to a team that wants to walk the ball up the floor and run a set play every time down the floor. That's not going to fit your style and you're not going to be happy. It's not going to put you in the best position to succeed as a college athlete.
And I think we had talked about this before, that with technology being where it is now, it's so easy to just go, and because you mentioned, you know if you want to play this specific style of basketball and avoid this other style of basketball, go watch those games, because they're all recorded and streamed on whatever service. And Division 1 potentially like ESPN or ESPN3 or whatever. But there's so many avenues for you as a prospective athlete. So the next, you mentioned finding the right fit, and we had talked about it before as well. How much do you guys really recruit based on culture? You find a kid and you know that, like, how do you make sure that they're going to be a good fit for your culture, and how much emphasis would you say as a recruiter should a prospective student athlete really research the culture of a school before making a decision?
Yeah, I think culture really is something that's undervalued. I think it truly is the backbone of everything you do as a program. If I'm recruiting a student athlete that doesn't fit our culture, my hope in recruiting that athlete is that this is going to be a 4 year relationship, potentially 5 year relationship that we're working together. So if you don't fit what we want to do and what our values are, we're going to be really miserable in this relationship. So we've got to be able to see eye to eye on those things. I think one of the big misconceptions that high school athletes and their parents have is that, we're some kind of basketball savants that are all mightier and better than you, and you can't just have a normal conversation with us, where it's actually the reverse. We are extremely open, we are extremely honest, and we are extremely available to you. And what I mean by that is our practices are all open door. We want you to come to practice. We want you to come and see what every day is like. We want you to come have an overnight visit and stay with our players in the dorm so you can get a feel for what the culture is like, not only at practice, but what the school is like, what it's like outside of the gym away from the coaches. I want you to know everything you could possibly know so that way you're making an informed decision.
Mm.
It's like you said, our games are live streamed. We can get you on a pass list and get you into the game at any time. We want you to be there and to be able to get as much information and educate yourself as much as you can. Because at the end of the day, that's going to help you make a better decision. And the more informed you are, the more positive you can be on our program that we're the right fit for you.
And I think to what you just said, how open and honest you guys are, like I'm assuming for anybody listening that strikes a chord with to go watch practices and watch games, you don't have to be, even on the recruiting list necessarily to go watch these games and go, experience what it's like to play for these programs. You don't have to necessarily be shy, because I understand, we were all in we were both in that situation where we were like maybe a little bit intimidated even by potentially asking a college recruiter or a college coach for, a pass, because I remember, getting some passes to go see Siena Heights games and Spring Arbor games, and I don't remember. I mean, they never it just never seemed like it was an inconvenience, and they were always very open and receptive to it. So I don't think you necessarily have to be, you know, intending on even going. It might just be an experience for you to go see what it's like. And, how open are you guys to just really having anybody come and have a pass? Do they have to be on your recruit list or your recruiting radar to come and see?
No, I mean, it truly is an open door policy with all of that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you might not be on our recruiting radar at all, and you send me an email and say, hey, I'd like to come to this game and watch it. Automatically, we'll put you on the list. We'll spend some time with you talking to you after the game. We're going to research your film at that point and just see who you are. If you're somebody that I don't know, and it might turn out that you're somebody that really fits the program, and then we're gonna go sit down, have a long recruiting talk after the game, and just get to know you better.
Right. And I think like it really puts you as the potential recruit in the driver's seat to handle, yeah, your own recruiting, experience and your own pathway, not to necessarily rely on you as the recruiter and the assistant coach of whatever team you've been a part of, but, ma- take it upon yourself to just say, like, okay, like, this is a place I'm interested in. I haven't talked to him, but I like the, and maybe it's there's a lot of private schools out there. Is Asbury a religious school?
Asbury is a religious school. Asbury is a private school.
And I think that, like, whatever religion it is, I don't know what it is, but like, oh, I'm Catholic, and maybe I'm really interested in going to a private Catholic school. Well, great, like, narrow down your list and figure out the division of that school that you want to go to and that you think you can play at, and then that's when you really narrow it down and make sure that, and basically take the steps that you just highlighted, and send them an email. Because how often are you checking your email? And when you get emails, are you looking at every single email?
Yeah, so with the technology today, I mean, whether you got an iPhone, an Apple Watch, you're on your computer all day long. I'm going to read every single email I get. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to watch every single recruiting video I get. It doesn't guarantee, I'm going to watch some of it, but I'm not going to watch all of it. You got to show me something in that video right away to keep me locked in. But absolutely, you're reading every single email that you get. Even if it's a quick 30-second breeze through and then delete,
Mhm.
you're going to at least read it.
And how many of those recruit like specifically recruiting emails would you say you get a day?
Well, so that's an interesting question because the student athletes that sign up for a recruiting service, what they don't understand is that that recruiting service has an automated email set up. So today is March 5th. If March 5th is a day that that recruiting service has marked, I might get 15 emails just from basically that recruiting service that is the same cookie cutter letter for all 15 of those recruits. So on any given day, it could be the automated day, and I might get 30 recruiting emails that day. On a normal day-to-day basis, at the Division One, Division Two schools, less than 5 emails a day from recruits. But like I said, those recruiting services, what players don't understand what they're signing up for is you're going to get the same cookie cutter letter as all other 30 people that signed up for that said I'm interested in Asbury, and it's going to be the same exact email, and they're just going to put your name in instead of the next player's name.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to get 30 of those, and those I'm literally going to just delete and not even look at.
Right, because it really it just means that that player didn't do their due diligence and they're just relying on a service to basically send out the blanket email for them. And and that's so interesting because I had a question here. Do you have at any of the places that you've been, have you ever recruited somebody based off of NCSA or I know NCSA is probably the biggest one, at least I think so. But have you ever used any recruiting services to literally bring in a kid? Have you ever brought in a kid based on a recruiting service?
I have never brought in a player off of a recruiting service at any school that I've ever coached at.
And isn't
Now,
that's just such a like a basket of false goods that you get sold then I think just because I mean and maybe some other people have different experiences with it, but and this is obviously just one experience, but it's an experience that's at literally every single division from junior college, which I forgot that you coached at Owens, right? I
yes.
forgot about that, but and then all the way up to Division One. So I think that's very telling to where you as a parent should be, or a student athlete should be spending your first of all your hard-earned money, but also your time and effort because man, it just seems like an opportunity to really take advantage of people.
Yeah. What I can tell you as far as the recruiting services go with that, if you take the time to pinpoint a school that you feel like fits what you want, and you will write me a personal letter explaining your interest in playing for our program, making it a personalized statement showing who you are, you're 100% going to get a look. And that's all you can ask for. What NCSA and some of these other recruiting sites, honestly, what it comes down to is a day that I'm just bored in the office. And at some of the higher academic schools that I've been at, I might hop on NCSA while I'm bored. I type in the GPA that I'm looking for. I type in that you need to be at least a 4-star recruit. And I just browse if I'm bored and just try to look around and see.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never actually gone on there and found a specific player that fit my needs and I wanted.
Yeah, well, that just it doesn't shock me because I kind of figured that's what it was like. But how do you guys utilize social media at all to recruit kids? Because from what I've seen, I follow some of the kids that I've coached over the years, and some of them are very interested in getting recruited for basketball. Some of them are very interested in getting recruited for football. And what I see a lot of college coaches do and programs do is they will a coach will tweet, oh, drop your film, class of 20, whatever, drop your film. and you might get like 1,000 replies, from kids just dropping their film in a comment section, hoping to get a look. And I think, and actually, I was talking about it with McGrail, my fiance, at dinner, and she had mentioned, it's probably just that coach, trying to get clout for themselves and gain followers, for their own, social media pages. I mean, how do you guys utilize social media very much, the Twitters and Instagrams or anything like that to recruit kids?
We we do not typically use social media to find kids. Now, what I will say is if there's an AAU program that maybe we've gotten 2 or 3 kids from and we're following them, and I've had success recruiting from your AAU program, I'm going to pay more attention to the film of kids from your AAU program that you're posting. Now, what we do use for social media a lot is, let's say you do write me that personal letter and your film checks out and you've now made it to the prospect board where we need to evaluate you further. I'm going to follow you on every form of social media that you have: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I don't do Snapchat and stuff because I feel like that's just kind of creepy to be following young girls on that kind of stuff.
Fair enough.
But with that being said, if you're a prospective recruit and you're tweeting stuff out that is questionable, that doesn't necessarily fit our culture, that, maybe you are posting derogatory stuff or even just retweeting and liking things that would be considered questionable for our fit of our culture. Let's say, for instance, Asbury, we are a dry campus. There's no alcohol on campus. There's no partying on campus. And if you're out here liking a bunch of stuff about drinking and partying, that's a really fast way to just get crossed off the list because you're not going to fit our culture. It's not going to be a happy marriage at the end of the day. So, just as quick as you can get onto a prospect board by sending that great personalized letter and showing interest in our program, you can just as easily delete yourself off the board by the way you represent yourself on social media.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the oldest, tips in the book is like, watch what you post on social media because it really can affect your ability to get recruited and, even I think getting jobs in the future and stuff like that. I mean, it's one of the oldest adages is just watch what you post on social media. So, um, that being said, with staying with kind of the theme of maybe some recruiting videos and social media stuff, how much time on average, I guess, would you say you spend on like a recruiting video? Because I know you said that you don't spend a whole lot of time on it. I mean, you probably just don't have the time, especially when you receive however many emails you get a day. But how much time would you say you actually do spend on average on a video?
Yeah, the thing you want to consider when you're sending a coach a video, you got to assume that I'm going to see 30 of these videos in my email today. So your video, it almost needs to be personalized for the school you're sending it to. If you know that we shoot a ton of threes, I want to see you shooting threes. I want to see you coming off different actions shooting threes. I don't want to see you shooting just layups, fast break, 1-on-0 layups. I don't want to see you shooting free throws. If I didn't think you could make open layups and free throws, we wouldn't be recruiting you in the first place.
Right.
So I want to see specific things. I want to see you making the right read. I want to see you coming off maybe a pin down and hitting a three. I want to see you coming through elevator screens and setting your feet and hitting a three. I want to see you into some more live action type of scenarios. The quickest way for me to just turn off a video is when I see 4 straight possessions of you just making a wide open layup in transition, or you're on a 2-on-1 fast break and you make a bounce pass for a layup. That's a fundamental play that you learn in the 4th grade. I would hope you can make that by the time you're hitting my desk.
Right.
Or if I'm watching you shoot 3 straight free throws on your film, if you can't make a free throw, you're probably not going to make it to our level anyways.
Right.
So, you know, cut out the little buffer clips of that and just show me the meat and potatoes of what you can really do as a player.
Now, would you ever recommend, like, okay, he's, Coach Hilkens says, 30 seconds at best. Maybe I'll just make my recruiting video 45 seconds or a minute. Would you ever recommend that? Just for because you maybe even to make it personalized, would you ever recommend making a personalized like minute long video?
Yeah, I think with the right editing, you can get a lot across in a minute. I think if you make a quick minute highlight tape in the link of your email, you can even give me a link saying, and here's a longer one if this interests you.
Right.
Because now you've given me a sample of what I can see with you, and I might say, okay, after watching a minute of you, I think you could be pretty good.
Hmm.
Now, if you're going to give me a link to a 5-minute video, again, in that 5-minute video, I don't want to see free throws and layups as filler material to to make your video 5 minutes long. Show me more actions of you shooting threes in a game. Show me multiple games. That's one thing that always bothers me with players as well, is when your highlight video is one game.
Right.
Because in my mind, I'm going, so did you just get hot in one game and you hit 8 threes?
Hmm.
And then the rest of your games, you hit one a game and you're just not that good of a shooter, but you had one night where you were really hot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, maybe make it a mission to 100% make sure that like the floor is different, so it ensures that, because I mean, recruiters aren't dumb, college coaches aren't dumb. They've made a career out of what they're doing, so obviously they know when a game is different, and if you've knocked down now two or three threes in the same game, you know, to just to your point, to mix it up and make sure that it's not just a one and done situation where, I've had games where I've hit five threes in a row, and I'll be honest, I included it all in my recruiting video, but the whole recruiting video was me hitting a lot of threes pretty much the whole time. So, it I think that's a really good point. Just and it saves, I mean, it should, in theory, save you as the player time and energy in focusing your efforts into, first of all, specific schools, but also specific things that they're looking for. So you're not guessing necessarily at what's coming, at what they might be asking for, but like you've done the research and you know exactly what they're looking for. So you know, so to kind of switch up topics here a bit. I had mentioned in the first part of the video JV programs and what they offer to anybody who's potentially looking to play college sports. I know that Siena Heights has a JV program and Asbury has a JV program. They're two very different JV programs for sure, but um, what was your approach, I guess, from the assistant coaching aspect? Like, what's your take on JV teams, if you will?
yeah, I think I'd even back you up one step further, back to the recruiting process. When you originally come to campus and you sit down and meet with our coaching staff, don't be afraid to ask those questions. Ask us, where do you see me fitting in? How do you see me fitting in? What are your feelings on freshmen playing? Because those are a lot of questions that you can get answered right away. Now, applying that to Asbury, on any given year, we're going to have 18 to 24 players in our program between varsity and JV. 15 players are going to dress varsity. So if we have 24 players, that means there's 9 players that are going to be off that varsity roster.
But
And
that,
again, this
go ahead,
go ahead.
sorry.
Well, and again, this goes back to go visit the school you are interested in. Go watch them practice. See what that practice looks like. I've been at schools where the varsity practices at 5 o'clock and the JV team practices at 6 a.m. That head coach is very rarely going to be at that 6 a.m. practice. So
Right.
you're not going to get seen. If you come to Asbury, what you would find is that our JV and varsity practices at the same time. Not only do they practice at the same time, but they also scrimmage against each other every day, which means that you have an opportunity every day to prove yourself, to show something.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think I think that was something that I found at Siena that we did not get so much of. It was quite a bit more independently run, where you were certainly more responsible for your own well-being and your own development moving forward. But would you say it's not necessarily a slight, to be put on that JV roster? I mean, obviously it's humbling. Nobody that gets recruited wants to hear that they're a JV kid or a JV athlete, but is that when you get put on the JV team, is it can you really treat it as more of an opportunity to really develop and really, first of all, probably humble yourself a little bit, but um, to really develop your skills moving forward and find out, I guess, if it's really right for you to be here.
yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the big misconceptions between high school and college is high school basketball is just kind of something that you do after school. You go to practice, maybe you're doing extra shots, extra skill work, you're going and playing your games, and then you're going home. The thing that I think is so misconstrued is when you accept that scholarship to play college basketball, you're accepting a full time job. We are paying you, let's say, $30,000 on your scholarship to come to this college, to come to this university, and to perform. That is your job. So it's not just let me show up for an hour and a half at practice and then call it good. You've got to really accept this and take charge of it. Just like you took charge in your recruiting process and finding the right fit, you have to take charge of your career now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, where we talked about, don't be intimidated. Have the courage to ask the tough questions in the recruiting process. Same thing goes once you're a player at that school. As a coach, I'm here to help you succeed no matter what that means. So if you need extra workouts, if you need extra help academically, if you need help in the weight room, whatever it is, that's what I'm here for to do. So if you're not getting the minutes that you want right away, or you're struggling on offense or defense or wherever it might be, don't be afraid. Come to me, ask me, hey, can we do extra workouts? Can we get extra shots up? What do you think from your perspective, coach, that I need to work on to earn more minutes or to get better?
Mm-hmm. And how many kid like how many years have you been at Asbury now?
I just completed my second season at Asbury.
So at Siena and Asbury, how many girls would you say went from that JV roster and played for the main roster?
At Asbury, we did not have a ton of movement for my first year. But this past year, we actually had scenarios where we used our JV team to get our freshmen minutes that might not necessarily get as many minutes in our varsity games. So kids that might have been numbers 10 through 15 on our roster of the varsity team,
Mm-hmm.
they played JV and played 30 minutes a night so that we could help that transition them into college basketball.
Right.
So they weren't getting necessarily a ton of minutes on the varsity, but it was our way to develop them of putting them in JV games and letting them play 20, 30 minutes.
Well, because it certainly is still a step up from high school basketball to be playing JV college basketball, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing that I think is really undervalued. When you accept that scholarship, whether it's varsity, JV, if you look at the statistics, it's something like less than 3% of all high school players across the entire country will go on to play college basketball. So just for being on that JV team, you're already in the top 3% of the entire country.
Right.
Then there's the fact that you're basically joining an all-star team. Even on the JV team, most of the kids on that team, they're going to be the best kid from their high school, the best kid from their region, their county, whatever it might be. it's like every kid on that team averaged 15 to 20 points a game in high school. And
Right.
now you're all on one team playing another all-star team from another school.
Right.
So it's not this, slap in the face, disrespectful thing to be on the JV team. It might just be something just as simple as, at Asbury this past year, we had two borderline All Americans at the two forward positions. So if you're an incoming freshman and you're playing behind a senior and a junior that are both borderline All Americans, that's not a discredit to you. It just might be something where you just got to wait your turn for them to graduate because they've put the time in and they've put the work in to be successful. And you're just stuck in a log jam of minutes at that position.
Right. And then to your point, I mean, at both stops you were at Siena and at Asbury, you had some pretty stellar rosters there. So truthfully, maybe it's a bit of an unfair question, but you guys maybe didn't have as much wiggle room to bring on some incoming freshmen because you guys were truthfully making a run at potentially national championship status.
Yeah, it still just comes down to how much you want to work and how much do you understand the work that needs to be put in. Um, there's this old adage that you see all the time about, my coach has favorites and they just play their favorite kid and I'm never going to be there cuz they just like this kid more than me. Well, the adage is true in a sense. I do play my favorite kids in every game. You're absolutely right. My favorite kids though are the kids that I think are going to win me the game.
Right.
It's not the senior or the junior. It's not that I hate the freshman. It's who do I think are my best players to help me win the game, regardless of class. So with Asbury, we truly have an open roster. When we started this past season, there was no guaranteed. Now we had our two, basically all American kids that we knew were going to get minutes, but that didn't mean, well, nobody else is going to get minutes. We had two freshmen that both averaged 20 minutes a game for us this year. We had two freshmen the year before that both averaged 20 minutes a game. It's very possible for it to happen, but it's also not going to be handed to you.
Right. And so, do you guys at I because I know how it works at Siena because I've been there, but it's essentially a tryout at the beginning where and you have the people that you know are going to be on varsity, of course, the guys who maybe were like in your position, the borderline or basically all Americans, but at Asbury, do you guys have like an open first week where everybody's together and then you kind of differentiate and split up from there based on, who you think are your best 15 that you're going to ride with that year? Or do you kind of know going in, okay, these girls are my JV girls, these girls are my varsity girls?
Yeah, it truly is a mixture of all of that you just said.
Mm-hmm.
We truly realistically have an open 6-month tryout because it starts in the summer going into the preseason. If you know you're going to run, say, a timed mile at the start of the year and you don't do the work in the summer, let's say you're a guard and you're expected to run, let's say, a 6:30 mile, and you show up to the first week of conditioning and you run a 10-minute mile. Well, you're not even close to the time, which tells me that you did not put in any work in the summer. So now you're going to set yourself back
Right.
compared to if I tell you for months ahead of time, I expect you to run a 6:30 mile
Mm-hmm.
and you come into the preseason and you run a 5:30 mile. I'm like, okay, so and so, they killed it this summer. I know that they're in good shape. So you've already got a check mark in my book that I
Right.
know you put the work in to be in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
Then as we get into practices and we start to compete, we start to scrimmage, now it's going to start showing, okay, did you get shots up this summer? Did you improve a facet of your game? Maybe your ball handling wasn't super strong, but you're a great shooter. But all of a sudden you're showing me that you can dribble, that you can pass, that you can understand the concepts that we're trying to accomplish as a team. Now you're going to earn more respect. You're going to earn more trust. Or if you're showing me that you still can't dribble, now you're telling me that you didn't work on your game in the off season.
Right. And so,
Um,
last couple questions I have for you here. Number one, and I will ask every guest that has this, and if you don't want to, no big deal. But do you have a recruiting story that you can share at all, like that is any bit different, maybe from, or not even, maybe it's a normal one, but I know that we had talked about it a little bit before, but anything recruiting wise that you wanted to share from your personal recruitment story that you think is valuable for others?
I think really from my perspective, it's more so the student athletes that I've recruited and just the ones that are persistent, that reach out to us, that know what they want, and that really kind of get over that fear of just asking questions and being open and honest. That's been my best experience just recruiting student athletes.
Yeah, well, it sounds like persistence certainly pays, but Matt, that is going to do it for this one. Might have to split it into a parts A and B because it looks like we spent about 47 minutes on it, and not sure if attention spans are that high. But very good stuff from you today. I do appreciate you having you on, and look forward to having you on in future episodes as well.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me.
All right, take care, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.